Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted that you've got the opportunity to join us today. And this to me is one of the most important and significant interviews that I've ever had the privilege to do. And we're joined by an incredible human being today, Mahir Momand. And Mahir has an absolutely amazing CV before we go any further. He was born in Afghanistan, and for the last 10 years he's been settled in Australia. So he now has both an Afghani and also an Australian passport. There's a lot more to the CV than this, but through his life and career, he's actually established 4 organisations, 2 in the banking sector and 2 not-for-profits. He's also held executive roles with the United Nations and also the World Bank. He's now the COO of a digital startup here in Australia, which is bringing Islamic banking to the people of Australia. He's also been the CEO of Regional Opportunities Australia, which is an unbelievable organisation that tries to match new migrants, refugees to opportunities, job and business opportunities out in regional Australia. And many of those small towns are actually in decline as an aging population or people migrate to the cities. So it was a really fantastic organisation. And prior to that, Mahir was the CEO of the Thrive Refugee Association, which is when we first came into contact with each other. And that was another absolutely fantastic organisation that was looking to provide microfinance to refugees and asylum seekers. So as you can see, there's a fairly amazing CV that sits behind Mahir. Now he's married, 4 children, loves to do a bit of football coaching. And Mahir, I need to introduce you to a guy called Phil Moss, who actually was the A-League coach of the Central Coast Mariners and then the deputy coach of Sydney FC. So I will definitely connect you and Phil, 2 very like-minded individuals. You will absolutely relate and get on with each other. So as well as football coaching, as I said, you love to swim around the beautiful shores of Sydney, and you enjoy the Australian outdoor life. I know you love to go camping, as I say, with your wife and your 4 children. So Mahir, welcome. Where I'd love to start actually is just to give you the opportunity. I've said a little bit about the CV, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to just walk us through your life story and the ups and downs of being, a 3-time refugee and the incidents that you've had through your life with the Taliban, amongst others. So welcome, and please do take some time to take us through the life story.
Thank you very much, Andy, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have spoken at various events, conferences, both online and in person. But this kind of like cozy niche group is really a fantastic thing. And I would love to, throughout today's conversation, know where Gary, Andrew, Helen, Alan, and Beck are located. Good to know where you are. In terms of my background, thanks for covering some of that, Andy. As you mentioned, I was born in Afghanistan in 1982, so just turned 40 about 3 months ago. When I look through those 40 years of my life, the absolute majority of my life being spent outside Afghanistan, the place of my birth. I became a refugee first time in my life at the age of 1 when Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. In like modern day current conflict that's going on in Ukraine with Russia. That was kind of like a similar situation about 40 years ago when I was born in Afghanistan. Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan and had imprisoned my father, who was a senior military general at the time. And because our family was being persecuted, my grandfather had to take me and my 2 sisters with my mom across the border to Pakistan where I lived as a refugee for the first 19 years of my life. I had to start working at the age of 8, 9, because we did not have any other men in the family at the time who would put food on the table. So as a young child, it was my responsibility to do that. And my father, who had just returned from prison after being in prison for 6, 7 years, initially, and then again for 2, 3 years, had not returned to be the same person, with his nail taken out multiple times, his tooth taken out, and all that. So therefore, he was not in the position of being the breadwinner at the time when he had returned. So I had to have that responsibility. During the day, I would sell oranges and things like that. During the night, I would go and study in a refugee school setting on the ground. We did not have classrooms or the luxury of chairs and tables and things like that. So that's how the first 19 or so years of my life went by. Fast forward, 9/11 took place, and the US invaded or intervened in Afghanistan and got rid of the Taliban. So we were one of the very first families who have returned to Afghanistan. By then, I had finished school. I had gotten into university in Pakistan. I hadn't finished university. I was actually in the first year. And when I returned to Afghanistan, at the time, we did not have a large number of Afghans who would speak some English. I did speak some English at the time and knew how to operate computers and things like that. So as a result of that, I got my very first job with the United Nations, particularly with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which was in charge of repatriating Afghans who were living in places like Pakistan, Iran, and all that. We brought back 2.4 million people in just 3 years' time. And then I moved on to work with the World Bank, where I initiated this program of microfinance, where we would provide microfinance to women to start small businesses inside the house. Some of you may have heard of or have seen or may already possess Afghan rugs in your houses. These Afghan rugs are made by Afghan women. So we would provide them the funding to do something like that. We would also assist Afghan farmers to grow things like saffron rather than growing opium, because the money of the opium trade was going mostly to the Taliban to fund their war machine. And we were also working with people who did not have any other jobs in villages of Afghanistan to start small businesses and things like that. So that's what I was doing. And as a result of that, unfortunately, I first time got attacked by the Taliban. And that led me to leave the country and go to Canada, seek refuge in there. So that was second time in my life becoming a refugee, this time in Canada. When I was in Canada, it was a beautiful country. Some of you may have been there already. But it was hard for me to come to terms with the luxury that I had in the situation I was living in, while I knew that back home in Afghanistan, there were a large number of people who were suffering the same as I was when I was living as a refugee in Pakistan as a child. So therefore, I wanted to return back to Afghanistan. When I told my case managers in Canada that I want to go back to Afghanistan, they thought I was some sort of psycho. They called psychiatrists on me and all that. But before any of that eventuated, I was already on a plane going back to Dubai, from Dubai back to Afghanistan, where then I actually reached out to the US ambassador in Afghanistan and got him to fund my new organization, which was also microfinance, but this time this microfinance was to be Islamic compliant microfinance, because the announcement that the Taliban were making before, when I was in Afghanistan and I got attacked when I was working with the World Bank, was that apparently the financing that we were providing was not Islamic, and that's why they were attacking us. So I knew that there was an Islamic way of finance. So I thought that in Canada, when I was living, that if I returned back and did it the Islamic way, that the problems would go away and Taliban would not attack us, and still lots of people in villages in Afghanistan, both men and women, vulnerable people who would get out of the situation they are in and have a better livelihood and better economic life and better education and things like that. Anyways, when I went back and I got a good amount of funding from the US government in Afghanistan to start this new network of banking organizations which provided Islamic finance, that became quite popular with Afghans. Within 3 years, we had nearly 500,000 people who were benefiting from that. Within 4 years, we had 51 community banks that we had established, part of this organization that I had just founded. I had 1,200 staff working within the organization. We had raised nearly 500 million US dollars for the organization from various government, including the British government. I remember being invited to the UK when Gordon Brown was the prime minister. Gordon Brown, in the meeting that I had with him, pledged to give us 60 million pounds. And similarly, there were other governments who would support the initiative that we had, because the impact of our work was such that the British, the American, the Australian, other Western troops that were stationed in Afghanistan were actually getting less and less target by the local population if the local population was busy running their own businesses rather than busy working for the Taliban. So there was a lot of benefit that was coming to those troops that were stationed in different provinces of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, with the massive success that this new organization, the Islamic Finance Organization, have had, the expectation was that the attacks from the Taliban would stop. With the speed that we were growing this new organization, that was also the same speed that the Taliban were increasing their attacks on my people, my staff, my organization, the bank that we had created. And it was hard to understand that why would they still continue to attack us, because this time this was Islamic. There was no interest that we were charging. We were doing Islamic finance where you are actually becoming a partner as a bank in the small business that you're funding. But then we found out after a lot of kind of like bad incidents that for the Taliban, it was nothing about Islam. It was more about control and power and greed, and it was far from an Islamic teaching. So during that process, I lost 17 of my colleagues who got caught by the Taliban and they got killed. In many of those instances, when they got captured, we would receive calls from the Taliban saying that so and so is captured by them, that we have 48 hours or 72 hours, some ridiculous timeline, that we need to shut down the entire operations of the banking network of all those 41 banks, otherwise this person would be killed. It was very hard to stop that entire operation, and therefore this means that we did not meet those target deadlines, and unfortunately, as a result, our colleague would be killed. Many cases, the head chopped off and sent in a box to the family. It was quite distressing and psychologically hard to be leading such an organization. I was just in my late 30s then, 29, 28, that was my age, to be responsible for such a situation, or to feel responsible for such a situation. But we had to continue, and I was continuing despite many attempts on my life until the 15th of September 2012. I call it a black day in my life when I was attacked. There's still scars of the bullets in my shoulder to this day. I was attacked in broad daylight in Kabul, in the capital city, by the Taliban, as a result of which I was evacuated immediately, urgently, brought to Dubai, and then from Dubai in a few days, I was in Australia. I could not return back because my chief operating officer, the second in command, also got attacked and all that. So that is the third time that I became refugee, and since then I'm living here in Australia. To Andy's point earlier, since arriving here in Australia about 10 years ago, I have been involved in starting up new organizations, some of them being finance organizations, to assist other refugees and migrants coming here to Australia. And some of those organizations being like Regional Opportunities Australia, which is an organization that assists people, newcomers to Australia, and connect them with employment opportunities in regional Australia, where there's a lot of demand for skilled people to come live and work there. Some of those regional areas are actually in such a decline of population that schools are closing down, that there's kind of like very little about life, and people are moving out of those. So that's what I've been doing. But in the past a year and a half, I've been now involved in starting a new type of bank. For those of you who are in the UK, you may have heard there's a lot of Islamic banking out there, but in Australia, we don't have any Islamic bank at all. So this would be the very first one that we'll be creating. In Australia, we have 3% of the population that are Muslims, but these people do not have access to Islamic banking. Now, I must clarify that when I say Islamic banking or Sharia compliant banking, it had nothing to do with what we hear in the media about Sharia, about this thing and that thing. It's just a different type of banking. Australia is a very diverse country, and Australians who are living here, despite their religious beliefs, deserve having access to diverse banking services as well. So that's what we are trying to do. That's kind of like 15, 20 minutes of quick roundup of what I have been up to in life. There's been a lot of zigzag, as I call it, in my life. If you look at the graph of my life, but that also means that there've been good things that have come out of that, because I've lived in different parts of the world. I've been quite privileged and lucky to meet and make good friends in different parts of the world, speak multiple languages, and have a different view of life. Sometimes I meet my Australian friends who may have had a very beautiful life, and good on them for having such a beautiful, prosperous life. But the exposure to life events may have been very limited, and therefore I sometimes hear and I joke with my friends that if it is a rainy day, as it is right now in Sydney, it may be a big deal. Or if someone did not get their coffee on time in the morning, it may be a big deal. Or if the coffee order was mixed when it was ordered, it may be a big deal. But when you go through some experiences that I've gone through, then those things become like you put them in perspectives. You say, well, you know what, not a big deal. And by the way, the definition of something beautiful is also quite different. For example, in Australia and maybe probably in the UK, when it's a rainy day, it's not a beautiful day. But in Afghanistan, where we don't have a lot of rain, a rainy day is a beautiful day. So the definition of beauty changes from culture to culture, from geography to geography. It's very dependent, as they say, that the beauty is in the eye or in the eyes of the beholder. That's kind of like a quick summary, Andy.
Yeah, and from the very first time I met you, you've always been a very quiet inspiration that sits in the back of my mind. And to your point there, Mahir, gives me a tremendous sense of perspective. And I've been very, very led a very privileged life, but I do recognize that, and I find you a very, very grounding influence on myself. And also, just before there's a few questions I really want to dig into around fear and courage, and around resilience and tenacity, and where this comes from within you. But I think it's worthy, just for a minute, you've also got if I get this right, the Hardier Foundation, which does amazing things. And maybe you could just to round out the complete picture. I know you're still involved there, and I know you created the first mobile library in Afghanistan, the ice cream van type mobile library, and I know you do prosthetic hands, and you've been sending emergency aid given the situation that Afghanistan now finds itself in. So I'd love you just to give us 60 seconds on that as well.
So about 6 years ago, in my posh Australian life, I was living in the eastern suburbs of Australia, and I was reflecting on my life as to what I have had and what I had been through. And I came to, probably for the very first time in my life, to the view that I could think about my past life. And I realized that what I had gone through was probably not normal, that other children should not go through the experiences that I have had, that people should have access to books. I remember when I was a refugee child, my books were just black and white, but the local Pakistani children had access to colorful red and green and blue and all those bright color full books. So I always had the desire to have access to those books, which I didn't have. So when I about 6 years ago, I was thinking about this, and I did research. Still in Afghanistan, there were a large number of children who did not have access to proper education and all that. So that's where then the idea of founding this organization called Hadia Foundation came into my mind. Hadia actually means gift in so many languages around the world. So we wanted to, through Hadia Foundation, gift books, gift education, gift prosthetic hands, gift multivitamins to people in rural Afghanistan, to children, to women, to vulnerable people, and that's how that whole thing started. In August last year, you may have heard, unfortunately, that Taliban again took over control of the entire Afghanistan, and as a result of that, a large number of people have lost their livelihood. 94% of the workforce in Afghanistan was employed by the government. That tells you the reliance on the government, and since there's no government, all those people, or majority of them, have lost jobs, and therefore people are on the verge of kind of like begging and selling their household item. There have been at least 3 situations that we know personally where people been selling one of their children to make money so they can provide food for other children. So as a result of that, we have been sending aid to Afghanistan, food and things like that, to assist those families. While the mobile library continues, we now have a lot of focus on the immediate basic human needs of food and water and things like that. So that's something that have always continued in the past 6 years, despite my day jobs of being a banker as I am right now, or previously running Regional Opportunities Australia or running Thrive. That organization in the background has always continued.
So before I come into some of the other personal characteristics, just starting there, how do you keep a sense of hope or optimism?
Sorry, can you please repeat that question, Andy?
How do you keep a sense of hope, and how do you be optimistic when there's so much going on within the country of your birth, and you're doing whatever you possibly can, but do you have a sense of optimism? Do you have a sense of hope? How do you provide others with that sense of hope?
Yes. So when it comes to hope, I mean, there are different aspects of life that one could be hopeful for. I'm hopeful for Afghanistan because I believe that in the next 4 to 5 years, either these Taliban need to normalize life, accept women into society, into work and all that, into schools, allow people to go to schools. As you know, high school girls currently cannot go to school in Afghanistan. So that needs to definitely change. No country has recognized that brutal regime so far. They cannot continue like this. So I believe that in the next 4 to 5 years, I'm hopeful that things will change. If not, then they'll be thrown away. Afghans, if I know one thing about Afghans, that they do not allow people to overtake them for long. So there's a very strong sense of kind of like retaliation against people who come and try to enforce on Afghans thing by force. So therefore, I'm hopeful that that will change. I stay hopeful in life generally because I believe that without hope, it is very hard otherwise to get up in the morning and to continue your day. We have a saying in Afghan language that you continue to live with the help of hope. Without hope, if you are hopeless, then you can't live. So the way I look at it is that there is no other option but to be hopeful. There is no luxury of not being hopeful.
And I want to talk to you about a couple of personal characteristics. I mean, the bravery that you've shown both returning to Afghanistan, but then also staying in Afghanistan when, as you say, members of your own team, unfortunately and horrifically, were losing their lives. Where does that courage come from? You know, you've faced fear and dealt with it in a way that, you know, I think many of the people would have walked away from that. Where did that come from within you?
So one thing I have experienced in life with fear is that once you feel it, once you experience it, and then you experience it again, and then you experience it again, then to a certain degree it becomes normalized, right? That's quite an interesting thing that I have actually paid attention to myself as well. That if I am using something more and more, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I get used to it, right? The second thing is because you know what it feels like, you are more aware. For example, I get a bigger shock if I'm standing in a crowd and someone makes a loud noise compared to someone who is not exposed to bombs blowing off. So the shock that I feel in such a situation, because I'm aware, because my mind automatically tells me that it could be a very, very bad thing. So therefore, I've noted in many situations, for example, when I was living in Neutral Bay until a few years ago on the eastern suburbs of Sydney, I don't know for some reason that I do not understand. Every Saturday there were cannons being fired. I don't know, 21 cannons or 14 cannons or something. I don't know. There's some ritual which I did not understand. I really, really hated it because I was so alert. But all my neighbors, every time I spoke with them, they did not really care because I was aware as to what that cannon can mean. Therefore, I was quite alert to it. The second thing is that because you're alert and you have been there, you develop a sense of kind of like strength to say, you know what, I know it, I can deal with it. So that's where I believe that the sense of courage or not being so fearful comes for. You still are afraid. You know that it's a dangerous thing, but because you're used to it, you are still able to take that chance. But for me, it was not only that. For me, it was because I've been through the experience of living as a refugee child in a very dire situation. I did not want my other country fellows to be going through the same experience. I felt inside me a desire to be this hero to go and help, you know. Whether I could do anything or no, that was a different thing. But there was a thing in me to say, well, okay, if this happened to me, it shouldn't happen to other people. Therefore, you go and you actually take the responsibility and do something about it.
And I just want to turn to leadership for a minute. You are leading a significant number of people in an incredibly challenging environment. What do you think is the traits of a really great leader?
I think I have always found, and I've been actually told, even in that younger age, by my people, that they quite like the idea that I was at the forefront of everything. While I was the CEO of this large organization, I was also the same person who was on the front line in Helmand province where the British troops were stationed. And I remember driving myself with my bodyguards, and on the road there were lots of bullets on the road, that the car couldn't or drive properly. Like the tires were kind of like moved, and we were about to kind of like crash. And so being at the forefront, being there, not sitting back in your posh office, was something that people really, really admired, and I couldn't actually accept just leading from behind.
Yeah, I think that's very very different circumstances, but I truly believe that was always one of my great strengths in corporate leadership was the ability to connect with every level of the organisation and never, I suppose, believing my own bullshit and getting carried away with my own ego, but remembering that leading from the front in the right situation is absolutely the most valid thing to do. Just in terms of, I just want to ask you a much broader question. How and what should we be doing individually, collectively, to help the people of Afghanistan, particularly women and children? Obviously, the situation confronting females within Afghanistan is desperate. So, what more do you think we can do as, first of all, individuals? And what are some of the things that you believe, first of all, this community, but then the broader community can and should be doing to help?
I think there are multiple things people could do. One, that it definitely is something probably at the reach of every one of us, that is creating awareness that this is not acceptable. I'm quite concerned that the Western governments, because of their own political agendas, may start recognizing a brutal regime like Taliban. It hasn't happened so far, but I'm concerned that if the United States government kind of like leans towards a situation where they normalize the relationship, that others will follow suit as well. To speak against that, to say that in the international family of nations, a nation that is governed by a brutal, barbaric group of people should not be acceptable. That is something that we can all do. We can speak about it on our social media. We can read the news when we hear something about Afghanistan with interest and share it with others. So that's one thing that all of us could do. I forgot to mention I sit on the Human Rights Watch committee for Australia as well. One thing that I often do there, because there are so many issues internationally, to kind of like always bring that on top of the agenda, that Australian government should not recognize a brutal regime like Taliban. The second thing that some of us potentially could do is sending aid to Afghanistan, to women, to children, to girls. There are lots of organizations internationally, from your UNICEF to, I don't know, to CARE International to, I don't know, World Food Program, WFP, different arms within the United Nations, and so many other international charities that do very good work in sending aid to people in Afghanistan. In Australia, as you know, I mentioned the Hadia Foundation that I started 6 years ago. We continue to raise funds as much as we can and send them in the form of food items to those women and girls. Third thing that people could do is to actually sponsor a girls' education. There are lots of organizations, including the Hadia Foundation, that actually assist people on this side of the world to connect with a girl in Afghanistan and sponsor their education by providing funding, small amounts. So these girls, 5, 6 of them, can group together, create what we call a secret class, and hire a teacher who can come to their house and teach them the school syllabus that they are currently otherwise not allowed by the Taliban government. in the previous Taliban regime, my wife, Yalda, was one of those girls who went to a secret school. A secret school is, let's say, in a community, my house. I allow a group of girls, for example, to come to my house every day, and there's a teacher who comes every day to my house, and then they meet and then they teach. So actually, someone's private home becomes a school, and the girls who come to this house do not have any uniform. There's no backpack or anything. They simply just come as if people from the community are visiting. That's part of the culture in Afghanistan, where girls would go to someone's house to hang out. So they're apparently hanging out, but that hanging out is happening 5 days a week, where a teacher also comes and teach them. So there are things that can be done. And as I said earlier, Andy, I'm hopeful that the situation will change in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. So if you can send me all the different links, I'll make sure they get shared with the Future You community through my other socials, with some of my clients. I will absolutely do that tonight or tomorrow morning. Sponsor, absolutely do that, and sponsor, a young girl's education. That's the absolute least that I can do. I'm really keen that we just open up, and if any of the group on the call have got any questions, if you're willing to give us a few more minutes, I think that'd be a fabulous thing to do. So, Gary, you've taken yourself off mute, so.
Yes, it'd be also good. Of course, I'm here. It'd be also good to hear from all of you at where you are. Gary, I know that you've unmuted yourself, so I would love to know where you are in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, an absolute pleasure to meet you, Mahir. So I'm in Fife in Scotland. It's interesting hearing you talk earlier about Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown, the previous UK Prime Minister, stays a few short miles from me, down in a lovely little place called North Queensferry. So that was interesting to hear. Like yourself, I'm also in banking. First met Andy through your days in RBS. Just an amazing story, and absolutely great to hear you speak this morning. Andy asked you earlier and talked about where you found the courage to continue with your business, with everything that was going on. I guess on a similar vein, one of the things that was striking me as we were talking about that was the resilience that you showed to continue as well. And I'm just wondering if you had, or you could share any thoughts of kind of techniques or ways that you found that resilience to keep going.
Thanks. And speaking of Scotland, I admire Scotland. I actually went for some of my course to University of Edinburgh, and also I spent some time in Glasgow. So hearing you reminds me of that beautiful time. And actually met Gordon Brown in Glasgow, actually, the second time when I went there. In terms of your question, I think so I have seen, Gary, in my life, people who've been really in worse situation compared to mine. So when I talk about my experience, people think, oh, this poor guy had been through tough life. But they don't know that I've seen people who have had really tougher than me, right? They've been really in a worse situation. So one of the things that has always kept me going is just to be thankful, is to always look at that and say, you know what, at least I have my two hands and my two legs. I still have eyes. I can hear, although my hearing, actually between the 2 years, only one is working. This is 7 out of 10, and this is 3 out of 10. So I have always looked at that. People who were either blind or they were physically kind of like disabled or intellectually disabled, or that because of war that they've been through, because of accidents in life and all that. And there were so many of them actually in the refugee camps that I was living in. So therefore, I've always been thankful. And as a result of that, I've been saying, okay, you know what, you're not really in bad situation. So you might as well push yourself and do better. And to be honest, I actually think that I am not using my full potential. In my workplace, my team who report to me, And at times when I report to other people, if I'm not the CEO or my board, they think that I'm crazy, I do too much. But with me, my own calculation is I'm not doing enough, because I believe that I have a lot of capacity. Because I've seen people who do not have a lot of resources, and they're doing much more than what I'm doing. So I think it's very important to remember that that there is different levels. If you're not exposed to it, my situation to you be like, oh, well, this person has done it tough, right? But if you are exposed to people who have done it worse than me, then you will put me in the right context and say, this guy is okay. I mean, his family is here. He has 4 children. They're all living in Australia. His wife is here. They have a house. They're not living on the street and things like that. But when you look at some other people, they're really doing it tough. So in my mind, whether rightly or wrongly, I've always have had this thing that there are people who are in worse situation than me, that I should be thankful for what I have right now, and that I should use my resources, whatever those are, to kind of like better, to be help or to be hopeful, but also to be helpful to other people.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, really good. Thank you. And Andy, it reminds me of the quote that you always remind us of, which is the one about that I complained when I had no shoes until I met a man with no feet.
Absolutely.
Or words to that effect.
That's
yeah.
right. I had no shoes and complained until I met a man with no feet.
Yeah.
So,
thanks very much.
Yeah, thank
Pleasure,
you,
Gary.
You really do put things into perspective for all of us. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments from anyone else?
So I'm about 10 minutes from Andy, give or take, a bit of traffic. And I used to also live in the UK. So as with Andy and Gary, I was at the Royal Bank of Scotland for a long time and in the UK for most of my life. And it's been a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you for, I guess, sharing so openly your experiences. I know it's for some people it will be difficult to do, and it's quite admirable that you can do that so calmly with what you've been through. And I suppose sitting here as an individual that's probably never experienced some of those, I guess, unthinkable events in your life, it's quite sort of unimaginable, really, to sort of, put yourself in your shoes. So I suppose that for a lot of people, that would mean that there'd be a lot of scars that you'd carry around if you let it. So I'm thinking, is there a period that you can remember, or a moment that you reached as a young man growing up, as maybe when you moved to Canada, or a moment in your life where you suddenly realized that you weren't going to let these events ruin your life? You were going to use these events to do really great things, which you've gone on to do. Was there a turning point or a build-up that you can sort of describe about how that sort of came sort of emerged in your life?
Yeah, there've been probably a multiple number of situations where I could kind of like go back to in time that actually led me to kind of like change direction, because I know some people who are in my situation actually have gotten to do bad things also in life because they kind of like had this victim mentality. They say, you know what, my life is really miserable. In Afghanistan, earlier in their life, there were some like from good rich families, but then when they were refugees, they didn't have access to that, so kind of like use that. But for me, I think it was quite remarkable earlier in life that my dad was not there, but my mom was really at the forefront of things. So she was kind of like a big role model. She was doing tailoring, and as a result of that, initially before I actually started working, she would be kind of like the breadwinner for the family. So that was one situation that I actually remember right from the get-go, that she would be working day and night, tailoring people's clothes, stitching and all that, and giving them back and making the little money that she could to provide for us. There were other situations in life as well. When I returned back to Afghanistan, where I felt that my very little education that I had, because I've gone to refugee school, and then I just studied 1 year of university. As a result of that, I got my very first job with the United Nations, and I was really, really over the moon with that. And then I said, well, if I could do with this very little to get to this, I might as well keep going and do more of that. And that's why and most of the time, my very little efforts have yielded a much bigger result for me. When I came to Australia, I already had an MBA in finance. But when I came here, I thought that I needed, now that I was in a safe country with beautiful universities, world ranked universities, University of Sydney was right there. I couldn't just sit in my Neutral Bay home, just go to my job 9 to 5 and then come home and watch TV. I said, well, I might as well use this time to go to university, which I did not have access to previously. But now University of Sydney was probably about 30 minutes from where I lived. So I went and enrolled in that. It was a different thing that they said, well, you know what, we want your employer to send us a letter to say if you could speak in English. I was telling them, well, no, I'm talking to you in English. So they didn't really accept the fact that I could speak in English. So I had to get my employer to give me a letter to take there. And when I went there, actually topped the entire year when the results came out. And as a result of that, they gave me a scholarship because my numbers were quite high. So there were multiple events or timelines in my life that actually I saw that by how much little I could miss and go the wrong way. And I was so close to it, but I was kind of like with very little difference, I was hopefully on the right track. And then I kind of like taken that and multiplied it. I've done a bit more on it, and therefore it has taken me really in a different direction to those people who have gone bad, have gone really, really bad. And for me, things have happened really, really well.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic question, fantastic thought process, and yeah, unbelievable answer. Helen, we'll end with yourself. So hopefully you're back.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thank me. I've got a new iPhone, and I mean it's great. I love the technology on it, but I'm still getting used to it. Okay. I am. But anyway, Mahir, when you were in Afghanistan, and even as you said, what's happening in Ukraine, and that we can only imagine over here what it must be like to live with that every day. And that, you know, we couldn't possibly feel or know, because as you said, we're fortunate over here, and your story just, hits home to us just how fortunate we really are. My question is, when you first went to Canada at 19, were you restricted at the borders? Like, did the Taliban try to stop you from leaving the country?
So the first time when I went to Canada, the Taliban were not in force, and they were not in government. They were in outer provinces, but they were not controlling the capital city where the airport was, out of which I was flying. So therefore, they did not have any control over my movement or anything as such. Recently, since they have now taken control of Afghanistan in the capital city, they do not allow people easily to leave the country. They use the excuse of brain drain, that there's a brain drain happening and they want to stop that. But at the same time, if you as a government are not allowing people their freedom, they can't think freely, they can't speak freely, they can't wear what they want to wear. For men, it is becoming obligatory to have a beard. In Australia, I have a beard. It's not a religious thing. It was more of a fashion thing. So therefore, people are leaving, but now the Taliban do not want people to leave. So if they were in power, of course, they would have stopped me from leaving. But they were not in power. I was attacked in a province where they were in control of that province, not in the capital city the first time. The second time, when I was attacked in the capital city, but they did not have control of the central airport.
All right. Okay. And just finally, in answer to your first question when you first came on, Andy was my executive boss when I worked for the Westpac Group, and that's for a number of years. And I've followed his journey, and he's always given me so much support in what I've done all the way through until now. So it's quite exciting. I try to tune into all his sessions like many of us do. I'm actually in Brisbane, Queensland. That's what I am. And I've travelled all over Australia. I've been to the Caribbean islands. I've been to that part of the world. I went to the UK on a holiday or about to go and got my international driver's license. And then my sister changed her mind and we decided to go on a cruise around the Caribbean. So I've been like around, but limited. And as I said, we couldn't possibly, it scares me actually, because we couldn't possibly begin to imagine what it would be like to live. But it's good to see that you are doing so much good work, for your people. And even here we can, benefit from your work as well.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Good to know. Earlier we were talking about courage and fear and things like that. In life, we learn from different people. While some may think that what I have been through in life, that I've been brave, but when I look at Andy, I find him really, really brave. And let me explain why I believe that. When I first met Andy, he was the general manager at Westpac. For him to make the decision to leave the general manager role of the top 4 banking institution in Australia and go and start his own thing, that if I just think about it, I get really, really frightened. Like I get frightened that how am I going to support my family, pay my mortgage, and go and start something without the benefit of having a salary to come through. So that is, I've never told Andy this, but every time I communicate with him, it reminds me that how brave this man is to actually take this move to Gold Coast and actually start something new and actually believe in it and take it to this level that he has taken. So that's really, really brave. I think me going back to Afghanistan, I don't think that was so brave. I would never be able to do what you're doing and to leave my paid job and start something without like the benefit of money coming in and paying for my bills and things like that.
Brilliant. So that is very, very, I will draw a lot of inspiration from that, and that's very generous of you to say that. I want to just give the final word. I'm just going to read what Beck put in the chat, and then we'll draw to a close. It's been absolutely phenomenal. It's been very grounding. Like I say, you're an incredible, quiet inspiration that's always with me, actually, from the few times that we did meet in Sydney. I carry you with me, and I often challenge myself, am I doing enough? And I also need to get the balance right between who I support and how I support them. I've been doing a few different things for the people of Ukraine. I've got a big, hairy, audacious goal to give some hope to the women of Afghanistan, but I'll talk to you about that, linking my passion for cricket. And I believe sport can be a real symbol of hope, and to create something for Afghani women, refugees, that could then become a symbol of hope for all Afghan women wherever they are around the world. So I will absolutely talk to you about that. But this is from Beck, who is another incredible human being down in Wollongong in New South Wales, Australia. Thanks for sharing your amazing story, and wonderful that you still have the same passion to make the world a better place, even though you could have stopped once arriving in the safety of Australia. But you use your experiences to keep fighting for justice. Very inspiring. Thanks, Beck. I truly believe I couldn't say it any better than that. So I want to thank you, Mahir. It's been incredible to listen to you retelling your life story. You're a young man. You've got many, many years ahead of you, and I truly believe you'll go on to create many more wonderful things in your life. I know everyone, I speak on behalf of everyone here to say, and Gary's put it there as well, fantastic session. And thank you for sharing your amazing story. So we're absolutely humbled and delighted that you've been willing to give an hour of your time to our community. And I can only but thank you once again. And thank everyone else for joining the call. And should you wish to connect with Mahir outside of here, then please do, ask me to connect you. And Mahir, if you would send us the Hadia Foundation and any of the links that you have that we can hook into, that would be our absolute pleasure.
Definitely, I'll do that. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, Andy. Beck, I did read your first message as well. Yes, in the UK, it's a normal day. Not so much in Australia, but a beautiful day in Afghanistan. And I don't know what other parts of the world think of a rainy day, but that actually definitely proves the point that the same thing can be seen differently. Very nice meeting you, Alan, as well. And Gary, Andrew, Helen, thanks again, Andy. You have a beautiful day, those of you in the UK. Have a beautiful evening, those of you in Australia.
Thank you. Take care. Keep winning.